Hello, Sarah. We are live. Welcome. How are you
Hi,
doing?
hi. Great, thank you.
Awesome. I'm so looking forward to today because we have a lot of things in common. So, welcome to everyone on the live stream. And of course, as well, if you listen or see that in the recording, to what is all of this about? Why are we doing a live show? So this live show is the Innovation Culture Coding live show where we deconstruct cases live with the guests. And it's all about making independent consultants and coaches who are working with innovation visible. So it's a window to the world and to the corporate side, especially for independent coaches and consultants, because I believe the individual and the individual is the magic. The person is the magic. You can have a lot of people doing the same process. If Sarah is doing the process or if I'm doing the process, it will be definitely different. And that's what this is all about. It's about authenticity. My name is Jens Heitland. I'm the show host. And today, Sarah is my guest. Sarah, tell us a little bit about who are you? What are you doing?
Oh, hi, Jens. Hi, everybody. So I'm Sarah Campbell. Originally I was a designer and innovator. I worked at places like IDEO. I've also worked as a client. What I do now is rather than working on projects and helping clients with projects, I work on them. So I work on the people because my observation of doing a lot of innovation work for decades is that it's the people who make things happen or not.
Yeah, love it. So there's already someone saying hi from South Africa.
Hi.
Yes, the internet has definitely kept us and navigated around the pandemic. Thank you very much for that. And of course, everyone who is jumping in, please let us know from where you are. Say hi to us. Say hi to Sarah. If you have questions in between, you're always welcome to post them, and we'll pick them up as we go. So, working with people and the case today. What is the case about? So, we have looked into describing a case that's very interesting to me, and I will learn a ton today. So, looking forward to do that. So, the case is a head of innovation of a company is having a problem. So, the company has a problem. The cost of the innovation efforts is too high and it's somehow not working. So the process they have used over years is not working anymore. They don't get to the benefits of they're used to. The costs are getting too high. So they reach out to Sarah. The head of innovation is reaching out to Sarah and asking her for help. So that's the case, Sarah. This person
Okay.
is reaching out to you. How do you take it forward?
So I really think that the most important thing is that they are a decision maker and they are able to influence what is going on. So the first thing that I'm going to do if the head of innovation contacts me is I'm going to kind of run a bit of a question and answer diagnostic on them just to understand really what the problem is for them and whether, because a lot of people who come to innovation coaches, they see the organization as the problem. They see, their colleagues as a problem. The resources, the budget, but quite often it's about the decision maker, and it's about the ability to either influence the decision maker or the decision maker being able to have share the mindset that's required for innovation. So I'm going to ask them quite a lot of questions about that in order to get to the bottom of whether they really, really have what it takes.
Yeah. So you would literally do a meeting with them. I guess it's not via email. You will go into depth with them either on a Zoom call or a personal, depending on the case.
Yeah, it will usually be online. Of course, it's online and has been for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But it tends to be face to face, as in we need to be able to kind of see each other. It's definitely one to one, because I'm going to ask quite a lot of kind of curveball questions in order to get to the bottom of what's really going on. So I think it's quite important that it's done in a kind of safe one-to-one environment where people can feel that they can really kind of share their own anxieties and hopes about what they do.
Yeah, could you share at least one tricky question which someone like a head of innovation would not love to answer in front of his colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to, is the problem you? Are
Oh,
you really an innovator? Do you really have the mindset to influence people to take the risks and the challenges? So, of course, I'm not even going to ask them directly that. That would be a bit of tough love, but I'm going to try to get them to understand whether that's actually the barrier, is that their own level of comfort within the innovation space.
yeah, love that, because that's really going into depth before you even start. So you're kind of you're trying to understand what is really the blocker, and maybe it's already that person. So let's assume, so this person is not the decision maker. What would you do?
So if we really got to the bottom of it and they maybe didn't have the confidence or feel they had the influence, or they really felt that the sponsor of innovation, or the person who should be sponsoring innovation within their organization, which should be the CEO,
Yeah.
always should be the CEO. And, increasingly it's other chief executives, but, I think that will include whether it's the chief technology officer or the chief marketing officer. All these people have to be able to enable what's going on, and they can only do it by sharing the same mindset.
Yeah. So it's not, he's not the decision maker. So you literally, let's say this in my German English, you will send him back to bring the CEO if he wants to work with you or the
Yeah.
company. You
Well,
will never say that so harsh, for sure.
yeah, I would. Well, no, I wouldn't. Bring me the CEO. Yeah, I think I would. I would definitely test to see if they were able to do that, because I think that this is who really is possibly the blocker in the organization. And I've just found that over so many decades of innovation, that these are the people who really need to, you need a kind of almost like a lion heart at the top of the organization to break down the barriers. It's quite break down the silos, create, I'm not talking about creating, innovation labs and innovation theatre, but actually make this stuff happen for real. Yeah. So there you go. Another sacred cow that I just would is I have a bit of a beef about innovation labs.
I haven't heard that at all. So okay, he goes back or she goes back and brings the CEO.
Fantastic, nice work.
How do you? So let's say they're now starting to engage with you. Contract and so on is done. How do you start with the CEO?
Okay, so the first thing is to bring some awareness to that CEO. Quite often, a CEO has got into the position that they are by being someone who is very good at playing the game that got them there, i.e., the old game of hierarchy and of structure and following the system. Now we need them to break that system. This is a very rare individual who is naturally able to do that, is to kind of go against the grain of everything that they've achieved in order to get them to a position of power and responsibility. So that's the first step, is to get them to understand that you can't innovate by doing the same things that you've been doing. necessarily. I've even found, if I may say so, that I've worked with some, very senior chairman, vice chairman of organizations who were, when they created that organization, when they originally got to the top, they were the innovator. They were the person who had all the new ideas, and they were the person who broke down the barriers. And then there's something about the dizzy heights of success that makes people kind of lose that. It's like, oh my God, now I've got something to lose. I got my position. And, but we have to be more than one trick ponies if we want to keep breaking down the barriers.
Yeah, it's so important. So you make the person aware. You help her or him understand what it is all about. Help as well to understand that maybe due to the history of the organization, history of getting into that role, there might be a couple of roadblockers. And then they're hopefully aware of it, understanding it, getting into that. Most probably that's not just one, hey, let's meet and now you know it. It will take most probably a little bit longer, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it does take a little while because people find it very difficult to change. And the thing about a workshop environment, for example, where people can role play or whatever, is, again, I'm speaking from experience, as soon as you're back into the reality of the corporate environment and the phone calls and the meetings, it's very difficult to then bring those new ideas and radical thinking into that environment because you're back to firefighting maybe.
Yeah.
So it does take some time. Yeah.
So you got them over, which means like they understand that they're aware of it. They understand that they need to take action. What is the next step?
So the next step is to understand, and always start with listening. So get them to tell me a lot about their, particular scenarios where they've felt like, oh, I could have done that. I could have taken this risk. I could have gone with something radical, but I didn't. I did this, or which was, I knew would work. I knew it would work, so I did it. which is how everybody got into this position in the first place. Is like they did what they know works. They have a formula. So we then would kind of work through, and we can't do it on a live kind of situation. We have to wait until there's an opportunity for them to try out the kind of new way of thinking. Sometimes this results in quite radical changes, which that person might leave that company because they realize they can't actually, the structure, the direction of travel, the shareholders, whatever, isn't going to enable them to be as radical as they really want to.
Yeah,
that doesn't always happen, by the way. Everyone just kind of runs away and join circus.
So if you ever work with Sarah, you will run away. No. So that means, if I understand you right, you're working with the person first and foremost, not with the company.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that it's there are lots of other consultants who I might work with, for example, change management consultants who might be working more on the structure of the organization, which might need to change as well in order to facilitate. I mean, if you think about the kind of org diagrams of a lot of organizations, they're very rigid and structured in a way to stop, almost like to stabilize everything. But, with all these kind of inability to be organic. So, and quite often for a really big, like Horizon 3 innovation, the stuff which is completely kind of new, you might need to like completely change that. Who's going to actually have the guts to do it?
Yeah. Here's a question from one of the persons watching. What are some of the questions that you use to open people up to discuss people's formulas, existing ways of thinking?
some of the questions, right? Okay. So I would, I might get them to tell me what what the vision of themselves is in their mind. Who do they, who do they kind of want to be, and who do they kind of model themselves on? Sometimes they might do that. Are they secretly thinking that they're Elon Musk? Are they secretly, who? And then I might kind of help them to understand what it is about that person that they really, really want to be. Like, is it, hugely successful, or is it the fact that, Elon Musk has gone through an awful lot of, difficulties in his childhood, which made him the way he is. So, understanding actually what it is that makes the psychology of these people.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you as well for the question. If you have more questions, you're welcome to post them, and we bring them up on the screen and we read them out loud and mention you, do a shout out to you. Before we go further, you mentioned Horizon 3 for those people who have never heard about, which might be one or two of the listeners.
Okay.
Can you just elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it's a kind of a helpful way, particularly if you're working in a large organization, to define the different types of innovation. Because one of the biggest problems, and I'm sure you find this as well, Jens, with the word innovation, is it means whatever people want it to mean. And for some people, it's changing the shape of a biscuit, and for other people, it's like throwing the whole business model into a completely new category. So which one? So Horizon 1 and 2 are generally doing better at what you've done before, whereas Horizon 3 is doing something completely new. Yeah. Launching a new product, maybe a new business model. It's much more kind of breakthrough and fundamentally different to what's gone on before.
Yeah.
Usually it's done as a response to a threat. an existential threat to the organization.
That's how we are wired.
Yeah. Burning platform is the mother of invention.
Yeah. So let's go back. So the case is a head of innovation reached out to you. They have a problem with innovation costs are too high. The processes are not working. You started talking to that person, understanding if that person is a decision maker. We have decided it's not a decision maker. So this person brought in the CEO, and you started to work with the CEO. You started to help the CEO getting aware of what his role is and the importance of understanding of that he is a decision, or she is a decision point in the way forward. And then you basically started with listening, understanding different scenarios, how things worked, and so on. How do you take the next step?
So I think you're absolutely right. We have to go back to that head of innovation, because ultimately he or she has got to hopefully is going to benefit from this, right? Yeah. Because they let's face it, they couldn't do their job properly. They weren't being they've been asked to do a job that they weren't being enabled to by the environment and the conditions that they were working within. So it probably would at this point go back to them and speak about, get them to articulate what it is that that they need, whether that is money, resources, but it's quite often not that at all. It is the kind of leading by example from the top. It is about seeing your boss take risks. How can you ask your employees to take risks when you are not, kind of role modeling that?
Yeah, it's so important, and especially as bigger the company is, as more important is it, because if you work with smaller companies, or at least in my experiences, if you have still the true entrepreneur running the company, they're used to that. They're still doing it. Let's say if they have less than 50 people.
Yeah.
But if you are talking about like thousands and plus people, employees, then it's like, then you're like a CEO that's more like a politician who is he's taking care of everything, but not really involved in the day-to-day business anymore. So you bring that person back into the discussion, at least understanding their needs. So how do you bring that back to the CEO?
So it could be that at this point, I mean, I would always at this point be looking to whoever I'm coaching, in this case CEO, to be starting to make suggestions themselves of what they can do to actually start breaking down some of the barriers and start demonstrating the kind of mindset. So it wouldn't be me asking them to do that. It would be maybe them asking them to come up with some ideas about how they are going to maybe I would say to the CEO, how about that head of innovation? Why don't you go and talk to them and and see if you can work on this new just maybe even create a very safe environment where you can work on something together. So that would probably be how it would come back, if you like, full circle to the head of innovation, because ultimately these are the people who are going to be executing and spending the budget. Yeah. But they've been. We need to take away this impossible position they've been put in.
Okay, so then I was understanding it wrongly. So you're working with the CEO and you try to get the CEO taking the steps closer towards the head of innovations, that they kind of do that naturally as the CEO. Kind of they ask them what they need or try to figure out what they need. Is that right?
So I think that rather than kind of giving, so the coaching style that I have is rather than giving, kind of homework. And here's a skill, why don't you try it out? Is to more kind of get them to suggest what they should do. Yeah. That I might kind of help them to kind of identify some really good examples. So I guess that's the kind of, it's a bit kind of nuanced. But I think that there's a danger of just going, oh, now go and kind of, here's a process, now go and follow it. That's not what I do, because that's what if that was going wrong with the whole innovation industry in itself, is it had become a process rather than an outcome.
Love that, because I truly believe in the same way, where it's like the CEO needs to find out what to do. It's not you kind of you try them to unleash it, but you're not giving it to them.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there were ways in which you can kind of subtly
nudge.
So nudge, yeah, exactly. Make suggestions, but if most people on the executive, they need to make those decisions themselves. They need to feel ownership. Even when I was a junior designer, I always used to feel that the best pieces of design that I ever did with a client was when the client thought it was their own idea.
Always. So when you just mentioned the design company you work for, you said before we started recording that 1 out of 10 projects who are like groundbreaking innovations are not implemented, or are often not implemented in different industries. What is different to what you do, and why do you do that differently?
Well, partly I don't work on the projects themselves anymore. As I said, I work on the people. So the success rate is, it could be multiple. It could be an entire organization becomes a successful piece of transformation. But it's whether that's so I was talking about kind of when I worked in consultancy, for example at IDEO. Yeah, I mean we would an IDEO would be given an awful lot of room to maneuver compared to a lot of consultancies, but it was still, you know, if you're taking genuine risks, if you're trying to do something that's really never been done before, i.e. Horizon 3 stuff, that you are going to kind of fail occasionally. And you know, it's kind of, you know, that one of the biggest lessons I took from IDEO was that, you learn to kind of embrace the failures, because you learn much more from that. And I think the whole corporate environment is so organized around not showing, you know, fallibility and not failing publicly. So you know, how do you actually, you can only do that if your leadership team is role modeling it.
Yeah, super important. Another question from Facebook. Any tricks for curating an experience to lead people to thinking it's their own idea when they are designing an interaction? Good question. Thank you very much for that.
Tricks. Oh my goodness. It's one of those things, like, how do you write about, I've you know, like, just so many years of kind of, you, first of all, as the designer or the innovator or the coach or whatever, you have to kind of let go a bit of your own ego, and you have to get that kind of sense of celebration through that person, you know, that you want to believe is their idea. You kind of, you can't just kind of tell them. You've got to kind of feed them the idea very kind of subtly. But yeah, I think the important thing is you kind of let them almost play it back to you. And yeah, and you'll go, that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, I love that. I can relate to that. It's really, it's so important that working with organizations myself, and have worked as well on the other side, where even when I was working inside of an organization, it was important that you sell the ideas, that it is the idea from the executive management, not from the innovation team or from the sales team. If it was a sales thing, because they're way more invested if it's their idea than if it's like, hey, that's the innovation guy. They're always coming with the crazy ideas. It's definitely a key part of it.
Yeah, and you know, one of the really, and I'm sure a lot of your viewers will know this already, but one of the biggest kind of killers of innovation in any organization is the not invented here, which means that if people don't feel that they've the people who've got to roll it out and execute on it, if they're threatened by it because it's change and they're not the kind of personalities that are comfortable with change, they will stop it happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there are lots of different kind of tools and techniques that you can use. I mean, one of them that I've worked with a number of companies on is, rather than the innovation lab, is the kind of, you spin off something under a different brand, or you kind of test it. Not quite a skunk works, not but you know, it is something that you actually almost have to, if it's genuinely Horizon 3 and breakthrough, you probably need a whole new team to deliver it anyway.
Yeah. And that's then coming back to the CEO. You working with the CEO, this person needs to understand that it's not going to work to say, okay, now we are disrupting ourselves from the inside and we just built a new business model. And it's happening with the same people who are like trying to sell the normal product, like 50% working on the normal product, 50% disrupting the company. It's not going to work.
It can work. I mean, there might be some people within your organization. I mean, I speak to very kind of junior people who've gone to these innovation sessions and worked in innovation labs, and they're so frustrated because they have got kind of new ideas and new ways of doing things, and they might be a bit naive, but they're not kind of getting any traction. And they're usually being suppressed by some kind of middle managers who won't even let it, this stuff be shown to the CEO. You kind of, that's one of the again, another big killer of innovation is the the kind of watering down, or just kind of if you're as a CEO, you've got to make sure your team is not blocking that stuff from even getting to be presented to you.
Yeah. I have a question towards the engagement with the CEO. So, like we have had in our case, it's often that the head of innovation is coming, or someone who is like the middle management is seeing that there needs to be done something. How receptive are CEOs in the beginning? Like you start with them around awareness. How much are they dialed into that when they engage with you in the start, like first session?
Everybody thinks they're an innovator, Jen.
Yeah.
So it's, again, we kind of we'll talk about what that means, what innovation is, and whether it's horizon 1, 2, or 3, what's the right thing for a company. If it's a little startup, and I do work with startups as well, it's you won't have that kind of complexity, but you might still have that. Your angel investors might have particular ideas, and it might be, again, that how do you reassure when you're doing something quite disruptive, how do you reassure those investors? So the scale is the scale changes, but the problem still exists.
So just iterating the case again, starting from the head of innovation who reached out to you, they have a problem with the cost of innovation and the process wasn't working. They hired you or wanted to hire you, reached out to you, helping them to solve it. You have worked with you have met with the head of innovation, talked with the head of innovation, understood, like, if they're if they're decision maker, not if they're the problem. What is the problem? And together you found out that, okay, we need to get towards the decision maker, which is the CEO in this case. And then the CEO agreed to work with you, and you looked into, together with that person, into awareness, understanding of what is innovation, what does it mean to them, like we just iterated. And then you literally listen to them, understand, and slowly work with them over time for unleashing their innovation potential through their actions, which they are doing then outside of that sessions. Is there more happening? So when is the contract or the engagement ending, or when do you say it's like, now it's about implementation, it's not about like you being the front runner the whole time?
Yeah, so I think, gosh, it's all starting to sound a bit like therapy, isn't it? But there are some parallels. But it goes. The engagement works for as long as the client feels the benefit of it and feels that they're making a progress and learning. And if that process gets stuck, then they might have a break from it. But and sometimes, I've had a gap of 2 years when someone's come back and said, okay, I spent 2 years trying to kind of get this, and now I need to kind of, I just want a sounding board, really, for how that's going. Yeah, so that can happen, and also when people change jobs, because they do. There's also quite often a change in someone's, right, I've got a new opportunity, I want to reinvent myself.
Yeah, that's true. Great. So I always ask a question, who your dream client is. So can you describe a little bit of, in the optimal case, what is your dream client?
My dream client is a someone who, it doesn't matter whether they're in a startup or a corporate environment, is someone who underneath believes that they've really got they've really kind of quite a radical thinker, but they're kind of felt that they've had to kind of restrict that, and they've kind of developed all these behaviors in order to get on in their job and to get to the position that they have. But then they really like go, they feel almost like they've lost something about themselves in the process. So it's like, how can they actually bring that out and show it to people and feel confident about doing that? And I suppose that's my ideal client, this kind of real rare creature of someone who is very successful in a business environment, but is also quite capable of very radical thinking and influence. And there are even some introverts who make really great leaders, quite more often than not, actually, partly because they're more likely to listen.
So do you then work internationally, or mainly in the UK, mainly Europe? Is there any restrictions you set to yourself?
I don't set any restrictions at all. So it does tend to be in Europe, and partly just because those are the places I've worked and the connections that I have within companies. But I'm happy to work anywhere.
Good. And it's from a coaching perspective, it's mainly digital, right? Like Zoom calls, whatever.
It tends to be. I mean, what I kind of like to do, if it is possible, and obviously COVID safe, is to meet someone at least once face to face. But that can be outside for a walk, and I think the more non-corporate that environment is, the better. In fact, so kind of meeting outdoors and going for a walk is a pretty good way for people to kind of reveal a little bit more about who they really are.
Yeah, that's a valid point. You kind of, on top of that, you work with the decision makers. You need to take them out of their normal environment, which is not an easy one as well, because they need to clear their mind to be able to open up. If they're deep down in operational things, business, whatever goes on, solving problems, how do you get them out of their environment?
Well, the pandemic has helped in that sense, because everyone's outside of their environment, and everyone's working in a very different way. And I might be talking to a CEO who's at the beginning, this time last year is in a cupboard under his stairs, to get away from his kids, and it's quite humbling. So it's in a way, I think the fact that a lot of convention has been thrown out is, and people are going back to offices now, but I don't think it's ever going to be quite the same again. And hopefully the mindsets will have changed as well, and people will feel a little bit more, we've all proved that we can work anywhere.
Yeah. Sarah, did we forget anything?
Did we forget anything? Wow. What sort of thing might we?
No, more in general. So we went through all the different steps, going from the case through understanding who is the decision maker, going towards the awareness, the CEO understanding what it is all about, understanding what is innovation, and understanding their role, and as well where they want to be. Then going really more into details of what the problem is, and then looking into, let's say, empowering the CEO to solve the problem on their own.
Yeah, I mean, the CEO doesn't solve the problem on their own, but they might remove a lot. They're the ones who have the power to make the big changes that quite often, even what seems to be kind of a little innovation that happens in a little innovation lab, it needs fundamental systemic change quite often. And that's, I can't emphasize that enough, is what lies behind that and what can stop it working is your company. Okay. And so you're kind of putting pressure on people to be the head of innovation or whatever, to be innovative. but you're not giving them the space to do that.
Yeah. And I think that's a key part for organizations where, like you mentioned, like being the good example is one part, but then as well, like letting them do it, not just being in the way when it comes to bigger decision, I guess.
Yeah, and obviously you can't have. I mean, you can't have everyone just running around innovating all the time.
Yeah. No, it's not going to work.
And believe me, I've seen companies where they've tried to do that. They've sent everybody on a course in how to do innovation, and it must be very frustrating for those people who kind of like because they've still got to do their jobs and. So yeah, so then it kind of moves more into like, how do you manage that? How do you manage innovation? But the most important thing is you can't just create this innovation pipeline. That is such another kind of word that I hear all the time. It's like this kind of, oh my god, stop the innovation. It's going through this massive pipeline. It's like generally it's a little bit of a kind of once in a blue moon there's something actually worth shouting about.
I love that. So I completely forget to mention that in the beginning. So I will mention it now. If you want to go to the show page where you will find a lot of details from Sarah and clips later on, and of course the audio version in a couple of weeks, go to heitlandinnovation.com/innovation culture coding, and you will find Sarah and the landing page for her, and of course as well a link to connect to her straight away. And if you want, of course, if you're a CEO or a decision maker, hire her in the future. Sarah, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. I really have learned a lot, and I hope people have learned a lot as well, or at least a bit. And there will be a couple of people who are interested in engaging with you and discussing at least with you.
Fantastic. I really enjoyed it, Jens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And for everyone watching this live, please share, ask questions as well in the chat. We will answer them afterwards as well. And of course, you're always welcome to join us tomorrow already. Tomorrow is an exception. We will not do it on Thursday. Tomorrow is already the next live show, which is, I think it's 6 o'clock this time, which is 6 o'clock German time. But I will post something tonight so you will see it. Sarah, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you. And